this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
5 receivers at Duncan's disposal. Duncan stepping up. Hit! Ball is loose!
Big ball here.
Marshall thinks they have it, and the Horde do!
Here's the kickoff from Amaretto Curry to the Hilltoppers, and we are underway, and a fake reverse on the kick return. And here comes Townsend down the left sideline. What a way to start it for Western Kentucky on the road, and it is an opening touchdown return, and just like that, the Hilltoppers strike first.
Justin Rohrwasser to try to win it for Marshall from 53 yards out. It's got the leg. It is good! And the perfect season continues for Justin Rohrwasser.
Goes for 2. Going for the win. Western Kentucky going for the victory. Rolling to his right, quick strike, and they did it! Western Kentucky has ended the perfect season into the hands of Willie McNeil. A shocker here in West Virginia, and it is over for Marshall. They end the regular season 11-1.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. I got Trace with me, and we're going to recap Marshall's pretty dominating win against North Texas. Before we get into that, follow us on Twitter at MoonshineTD and follow the podcast at MSTD_podcast on Twitter. Of course, we have the YouTube channel, the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Go find that, follow it, subscribe to it so you don't miss an episode. If you don't miss, or if you can't find an older episode you want to listen to, they're all over there on the channel. And of course, from time to time, we go live. It's kind of a rarity, but we do that, and it will be over there on the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast YouTube channel. Of course, you can get the show. Please subscribe, rate, comment, whatever you want to do to help us continue to grow this thing. You can find us on Spotify and iHeart. Anywhere you can get a podcast, you can find us. Whatever your favorite platform is, chances are it's available on that platform. So, Trace, the Herd went down to Denton, Texas, the dreaded trip to the state of Texas, and they put on a whooping early on in the game, at least through the first half, on North Texas. Put a lead up that the Mean Green could not come back from. It just wasn't going to happen. And to be honest with you, I don't think you saw that coming. I definitely didn't see that coming, at least not in a half of football, compared to what we saw last week. So the Herd gets the win 49-21, moves the record to 4-3 overall, 2-1 in Conference USA, and sole possession of second place right now in the Conference USA East Division. Technically a half a game behind Charlotte, but they haven't played Charlotte. So if they beat Charlotte, they will actually be in first place in the East if these records hold, because they would then own the tiebreaker over Charlotte with the same identical record, of course. This is only Marshall's third all-time victory in the state of Texas, and boy, it was a convincing one. So before we get into stats and indicators, give me that opening, the opening feelings here on the show. I mean, wow, what an effort, really, by the Herd.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to say they were in desperate need of a game like this would be an understatement, because they really needed a game like this. And to be perfectly frank, I didn't think it was going to come in this game, because, I mean, like a lot of the things you've already said, in the state of Texas, they had only won twice before this, and both of those wins were not necessarily the most convincing, glorious-looking things you've ever seen. So, like, even when they won, they didn't look that great doing it. But this game, through pretty much the entirety of the game, when it actually mattered, they were great in this game. And, like, it was a big relief to see. Grant Wells absolutely played arguably his best game in a green and white uniform. If you look at the numbers and the QBR and everything, this was arguably his best game statistically at Marshall. He was sensational in this game. I mean, a school record for consecutive completions. I mean, that's crazy, because, like, if you feel like every other throw, you never know if it's going to be high or, out of the or out of the reach of the receiver. So he was really on in this game, which is a good thing to see. Hopefully that continues. Offense did a lot of great things. Defense played really well up until, they gave up some rushing yards, which they always do now. But I mean, when it really mattered and when the game was still, in question, they played really well. I mean, in the second half, I mean, it was already a blowout. So, but it was a very good team effort, overall team effort, and it's really, really a pleasant sight to see. They finally broke through in the state of Texas in the way that, they should have against a team that North Texas looked totally dysfunctional in this game. Just totally dysfunctional. I didn't quite see that coming. They had put up some pretty good efforts so far this year. This was not one of them. Marshall played really well, and, this is a good thing. It could be one of those hopefully kind of season-turning games, because if you lose this game, you're under 500 heading into the bye week, and now you're over 500 in good position in the East right now, early on, albeit, but still good position. So hopefully this is one of those turning point moments of the season for the Herd, because they played really well.
They did play really well. But the shocking thing to me is, as I was preparing for this episode and writing down stats and indicators and all that kind of stuff, I expected it to be far more lopsided, but it really wasn't. The overall numbers at the end of the game were quite similar. And yeah, Marshall started working in guys on down the depth chart. This was an opportunity for guys to get reps at game speed and get some of these guys into games that may not otherwise get into a game. So it's nice to get, full speed, game speed action for some of these young guys. And especially to know that it doesn't count against you. They're not, not burning a year of eligibility. If some of these guys don't get in anymore, they'll still be able to redshirt and stick around and all that kind of stuff. So when you have the opportunity to do that, I'm glad they did. So some of these yards are a little misleading. It's not like the first team defense was giving up all this kind of stuff, but still, some of it is concerning. But let's talk about those main indicators. Total yards is closer than I thought it was going to be. 477 for the Herd, 411 for North Texas. Time of possession is fairly close. 32 minutes, 14 seconds for the Herd. 27 minutes, 46 seconds for North Texas. First downs, 24-18 in favor of the Herd. And turnovers are a push, 2-2. Grant Wells had, I would tend to agree, potentially the greatest all-around game in his career in this game. Was it the biggest marquee win? No. Was it the most eye-popping throws? No. But overall, the collective of the game, yeah, this might have been his best effort. 24 out of 32, 323 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception that was really on a deep ball into the wind, but still one that shouldn't have been thrown. Here's where the 75 comes in, Trace. It seems like it's happened every game. 75% completion percentage for Grant Wells in this game. QBR total of 89.5. Also, 6 carries on the ground, just 4 yards, but 3 of them went for touchdown. Then you mentioned the all-time Marshall record for consecutive passes completed in a game, which now stands at 18. It didn't just break it. He shattered it, because the record was 13 by Byron Leftwich, and now it's 18. That's going to be hard to break. And I tweeted this in real time I didn't tweet it when the record was broken. I tweeted it when the record, or when his streak ended. This is the same guy that didn't complete a pass in the first half of a game last year. Yep. And now he's setting the consecutive completions record. I mean, the hot and cold for Grant Wells is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not picking on him at all, but you can't not remember that you go a whole half without completing a pass, only to set this all-time record. With Marshall boasts some of the most prolific passers to ever play college football. And now that record belongs to Grant Wells. So good for him. Rasheen Ali had a really good bounce back day. 20 carries, 109 yards, found the end zone again 2 more times, 5.5 yards per carry, and 1 reception that went for 50 yards. He was a move away from breaking that one all the way. Xavier Gaines leads the way for the Herds in catches, tied for the team lead in yardage. Xavier with 5 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. Willie Johnson, 4 catches, also 77 yards. I tweeted this, and I know you saw that, and I bet some other Herd fans saw it as well. I think somebody's listening to the podcast, Trace.
Hopefully.
Because Xavier Gaines started seeing some early targets, and he was making some plays. Crazy how that works. Willie Johnson, I mentioned. Jaden Harrison, the transfer from Vanderbilt, 3 catches, 28 yards, got into the end zone with 1 touchdown. All in all, Herd's offense, 477 yards, 5 touchdowns on offense. Scored on 6 drives in a row. They punted really fast to open the game and then scored touchdown on their next 6 drives. When's the last time you saw that happen? Wells, Ali, Willie Johnson, Xavier Gaines all had great bounce back games from an ugly offensive output from last week. But here's the big head scratcher to me. If you'd have told me preseason that we are now halfway through the season and Corey Gamage still doesn't have a touchdown reception, I would think you are crazy. Yet here we are. It's not a down thing. I'm not saying it's a terrible thing. I'm just saying that is like a real head scratcher. How does that guy? How's he not found the end zone yet? How's that happen?
Clearly did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, has not found the end zone yet. Also, 2 other things of note on offense. Stone Scarcelli, what an amazing catch. If that doesn't make the Mossed segment, I don't know what does. So shout out to Stone for making that killer catch with one arm being tied basically by the defender. And then lastly, keep your positive vibe shooting towards Devin Miller, who had an excruciating injury early on in the game for the Herd. We're hoping, of course, for a speedy, full, and complete recovery for Devin. We want to see 83 back on the field as soon as possible at 100%. So we're thinking about you, bud, and we hope any medical treatment that you needed or will need will go flawlessly and get you back on the field as soon as you can. Trace, I'm going to go ahead and skip to the defensive stats real quick so we can get into grades, because I want to expand the grades portion of conversation a little bit more moving forward. So I'm just going to keep going in. Give me another 2 minutes and we'll get right into grades. Defensively for the Herd, it's Najee Johnson, 8 tackles, 7 solo, and 1 pass defended. Abraham Beauplan, 6 tackles, 5 solo. E.J. Jackson, Corey McCoy, and Brian Cavalcante all with 5 tackles apiece. Jackson, 5 solo, 1 pass defended. McCoy, 4 solo, and an interception for the second straight week. Good for him. And Cavalcante, 3 solo. Impact plays, they were there, but they weren't like overwhelming, which is kind of another reason that surprises me, since North Texas was able to do nothing on offense. It's not like they weren't getting sacked every third drop back or anything like that. So Eli Neal and TJ Johnson come away with the sacks. Eli Neal also gets an interception to end the half. And the team as a whole, only 4 tackles for loss. That's it. So impact plays were there, but not huge. Here's where it gets worrisome for me. You said they gave up some yards on the ground. Yeah, 277 of them. That, my friend, is concerning. And yes, a lot of those were to the first team defense. DeAndre Torrey, the running back from North Texas, had 179 rush yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. He gashed the Herd for a 75-yard touchdown and a 51-yard touchdown. Special teams for the Herd, Shane Chucci, no field goal attempts, is 7-7 on extra points. They had a couple of decent kick returns. Robert Lefevre did an okay job of punting. You know, you're not going to do too much when you're talking about the massive wind, I guess, they had going on in Denton. But because of that, it forced the Herd into some fourth down conversion attempts and third downs. They did really well. 7-13 on third down, 2-2 on fourth down. So there's your Herd offensive and defensive special teams leaders in a nutshell. It was an excellent overall effort, but I want to get right into grades because I know you have some thoughts here, and I want to just be able to, expand on that more than normal. Quarterback play. Let's revisit what Grant Wells did. We also saw a sprinkling of Luke Zaban of the Huntington Zabans get into the game. So what do you got for the quarterback play overall for the Herd?
Overall, I went with an A. I mean, I thought this was – I put it this way. If it wouldn't have been for that one interception, albeit – it was in an irrelevant moment of the game, all things considered, it would have been an A+, because Grant Wells was superb in this game. And, I don't throw that out there lightly because, he's had some games this year where you just really questioned, is he the guy moving forward? Everybody's been questioning that this year. But thankfully in this game, he showed just some of what he can do. And, I mean, like you said, his hot and cold spells are like insane because he can be scorching, he can be all time great, and then he can be cold to where you can't complete a pass, like frigid. So it's like you never know which you're going to get sometimes, but this game, it was scorching for the majority. I mean, 24 out of 32 is a really high completion percentage. 323 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like I said, the 1 pick was not wasn't a good throw, but at least it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But if that's a close game or something, you can't have a throw like that. Unfortunately, he's had too many of those this year, but that one was just, it was just kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. QBR, I don't know. I mean, obviously I don't have them all written down, but 89.5 QBR might end up being his highest maybe of his career at Marshall. I mean, I know he's had some in the 80s, but I don't know if he's had one almost 90 before. So that was an absolutely exceptional performance there. And like you said, the 18 straight completions. I mean, breaking Byron Leftwich's record, that's no small feat there. I mean, that's held for 20 years or so. I mean, he had a phenomenal game. And if it wasn't for the one interception, it would have been an A+. But because of that and because it's just a bad habit, that's what Huff keeps saying about the turnovers from the team. It's just a bad habit. Because he still, unfortunately, did not break the habit, it's only an A. But it's still a very, very good performance from Grant Wells.
Yeah, it was. This is the type of thing that I think Herd fans needed to just see that he was capable of doing, regardless of the quality of opponent, regardless of what the other team's defense was doing. I think Herd fans needed to see that he was just flat capable of doing this from beginning to end. And there were some hiccups along the way, but look, the long throws were much more accurate. Even the ones that were a tad high, the guys were hauling in. So a lot of credit to the wide receivers and tight ends for, allowing him to get 18 consecutive completions. Those guys were catching the daggone ball. So he was putting it in a place where they could catch it. And to their credit, they were actually doing that. They were catching the ball. Nothing was slinging through hands and getting tipped. And, we're talking about other things. Also, I'm sure it probably happened at some point during the game, once or twice, but I didn't recall that, okay, we're 3rd and 6, let's chuck it 40 yards and see what happens, like we have been complaining about. So the play call selection was a little bit better. It just seemed like it was a little bit more refined game, both in play calling and execution for the Herd. So good for them. Good for Grant Wells. And, hey, good for Luke Zaban for getting in the game and making some plays, moving the chains a couple times. I mean, Marshall does have a more than capable backup quarterback, so I would love to see him be able to get into some more games. But, the ones that have just been tight, it's not going to happen in a tight game unless you see an injury, and that's not what we want to see happen. So offensively as a whole, let's remind you, got 477 yards, just shy of 500 yards of offense, 5 offensive touchdowns. I guess it's 7 offensive touchdowns, 5 on the ground is what I meant to say. Not bad. Grant Wells was ultimately responsible for the 2 turnovers. He had the interception and he got stripped on a drop back. But other than that, that's not really his fault. But still, what do you got for this offense?
Yeah, I gave the offense an A, much like Grant Wells' grade. I gave offense an A. I mean, they got back to looking like they did early on this year. 49 points, very good day there. 477 total yards. It's always a strong performance. 323 passing, 154 rushing. And, Rasheen Ali had himself a game, and that's good to see. You want to see him over 100 yards more often. And I like the fact that he got 20 carries, and he really, showed what he can do, which at this point I think we know what he can do. It's just if he gets enough opportunities to do it. And offense was also 7 of 13 on third downs. That's always a really good day when you're over 50% on third downs. That's always going to get the job done. And another kind of underrated factor is they were 2 of 2 on fourth down. And they have struggled at times this year on fourth down. I mean, early in the game, it was 4th and 2 inside of the 10 or 5 yard line, and they ran for a 3-yard pickup. And I think that was a very big play right there, because if North Texas stuffs them there, maybe they have more confidence. And Marshall, they had struggled in the past this year with short yardage on fourth down. So good to see there. They were about +5 in time of possession. The offense was able to keep the ball, and not run clock, but they were able to control the clock a little better than in recent weeks. 2 turnovers, like I said, the 1 interception from Grant Wells was just a bad throw late, in a irrelevant point of the game. And then the other turnover, which was also it was when the game was already decided. It was just because the lineman, missed the block or whatever. And that's not on Wells, but still you don't want to see any turnovers. I mean, it's just a really bad habit. Even in a blowout win, it doesn't make it any less, of a big deal. So gotta get something figured out, because they're like dead last in the country right now in turnovers. So gotta get something figured out. And then the offense didn't do a whole lot in the second half, but to be fair, they had 42 points in the first half, so it's not like you're expected to go out and put up 42 more in the second half. So They did more than enough to win the game, and they were really good when it mattered. So I give them an A.
Yeah, it is an A performance, but you're right. The turnovers still just need to go away. There was no pressing need to throw that deep pass. What do you gain from that? You might hit the end zone, but in double coverage deep down the field, it's just not been there very much all year long anyway. So,
no,
but we're nitpicking. And when you can nitpick little things like that, that probably means you had a pretty good game.
Yep.
What I don't want to take away from this offense is that so many guys had a good game, and it's merited that they get the accolade and the pub that we're giving them. But perhaps the biggest offensive weapon for Marshall was the North Texas defense, because they could not get out of their own way with penalties. They had 17 penalties for 161 penalty yards. Now, of course, not all of those were on defense, but geez, a lot of them were. A lot of them were. And to Marshall's credit, they only had 5 penalties for 30 yards.
Yep.
If you're going to have 5 penalties, 30 yards is kind of what you want to have, So that's a lot of 5-yarders to get a yardage total that low. But poor North Texas, I felt bad for them, and they just couldn't get it going. They couldn't get it right. It was almost to the point that it was like, man, did these guys just give up on their coach? Did they just quit? It was ugly. And I know North Texas fans are probably seriously PO'd right now and asking some hard questions. And I can't say that they're 100% wrong. They went out and got boat raced on a home field, and wow, it was not pretty. Defensively, what do you got for the Herd? Look, I am concerned about 277 rushing yards allowed. I just am. And for the third straight week, maybe, I don't know if it's consecutive weeks or not, but at least for 3, maybe 4, I don't know. I didn't look that closely, but we've seen a single running back scorch Marshall. We're talking 150 plus yards, at least 3 weeks in a row, maybe 4. I don't know. I have to go back and look, but what do you got for this defense?
Yeah, I gave them a B+. I thought they were they were solid for the majority of the game. Only gave up 21 points, and let's be honest, only 7 of those really even mattered, because the other 14 were late in the game when they had a lot of young guys in there. So, the first team defense really only gave up 7 points. So that's a awesome day there. Gave up 411 total yards. That's a little bit high, but like you said, a lot of that is because of the situation being they're playing a lot of young guys and the game's well in hand. So it's not all because the defense just wasn't very good. That's not the case. 277 rushing. I know it's really. I know those 2 long touchdown runs accumulated like half of that or more than half of that, but you still can't. They're giving up way too many big chunk runs. It's apparent they just have struggled against the run this year. And Lord have mercy if they end up having to face I'm not trying to foreshadow too far, but if they end up having to face a UTSA in the conference title, Sincere McCormick might run for 300 yards on this team. It'd be horrible. So they have to figure out something there. Defense was good on third downs. They held them to 5 of 15 on third downs. They held them to 0 for 6 on fourth down.
Yeah,
that right there popped out at me. I saw that and I'm like, oh, okay, that'll get the job done right there. Defense also forced 2 turnovers. Really good stuff there. 2 sacks, 4 TFLs, and 2 quarterback hurries. So a relatively modest day in terms of pass rush and stuff, but it didn't really matter because they were able to keep them out of the end zone. Even after a couple of those offensive turnovers, they still kept them out of the end zone, I think, on both of them. So, or didn't, they still stopped them on the ensuing possession. So defense made some big plays when it counted. The run defense is just a problem. You want to think a lot of that in this game is just because the situation, but they've been getting gashed all year. So I don't really know what something's going to be done there. Something has to be done there. The rubber's got to meet the road. I mean, because it's not good. So
Yeah.
that's a concern.
Well, you look at what's remaining on Marshall's schedule and who runs the ball well and who has like a mobile quarterback and or a dual threat quarterback type thing, and it's some of the teams that you have to get through to get that title shot, and namely, Charlotte. They do a good job of Reynolds runs the ball well, throws the ball well. They've got capable backs, and they're sitting atop the East right now, and you're gonna have to get through them. FAU always seems to have good runners. Whether or not they'll be able to put enough plays together to beat Marshall is yet to be seen, obviously. And, we talk about UAB, what UAB's good at, kind of everything. So they're, you got good running teams. Western is about the only team that's not dominating on the ground, but they're dominating through the air. So, Marshall's got to get some stuff figured out defensively. And I don't know what that is, but they got guys that get paid a lot of money to figure it out. So I hope they can figure it out, because they got a bye week coming. They get one more get it right game, and then that's it. You said it, the rubber meets the road, and that's where it begins to meet the road. Yep. Special teams wise, wasn't much going on really. Willie Johnson didn't have much of an opportunity to return punts. There was a decent kick return, and Chuchi's perfect on extra points. Lefevre kind of limited in what you can do with a bunch of wind blowing either in your face or at your back, depending on field position. So what do you got for special teams?
Yeah, not much to go on with special teams, but I gave them a B. I mean, there really isn't anything. This is like maybe the first time ever that I can't think of anything necessarily good or bad about them. It was just they just did it. Like they just, I mean, it put it this way: it was good enough for a B, but it wasn't good enough because there wasn't anything. They didn't have to do anything. I mean, looking at kick returns and punt returns, like you said, the one kick return or whatever point in the game that was, and nothing else really other than that stands out. No field goal attempts, which, Lord, if they would have tried field goals in that wind, it's hard to tell where it would end up. So, but he didn't. He was 7-7 on extra points, which was good. Lefevre, I didn't write down how many times he punted, but it still says 44.3 yards per punt, and that's pretty impressive given the fact that they were saying 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts and stuff. I mean, it was a very windy evening, and he still managed to boom about 44 yards a punt, which is, I think, a pretty impressive feat. But yeah, I mean, there really wasn't much else going on for the special teams, good or bad. So a B seems fair.
Yeah, it was only 4 punts on the day for Lefevre. And Marshall had been moving the ball so well. I don't know off the top of my head where he had to punt from every single time. So, whatever. But, yeah, it's a solid day all around. Coaching, Trace, bounce back effort on the long road trip out to Texas to get a big win. Honestly, on a fairly premier time slot. CBS Sports on Friday night, what do you got for the coaching staff?
I gave coaching an A. I thought it was a really good day for them. There's a lot that was going against Marshall in this game. They had been really struggling. Their overall team play has not been very good lately. This is a short week on the road in Texas where they always struggle, and they came out and they punched them in the mouth. And North Texas never recovered from it. And you got to give the coaches credit for that. I mean, just the fact we're able to talk about a blowout win in the state of Texas is enough to give them an A. I mean, and they did a good job, like you said. The offensive play calling seemed to be a little bit better. It seemed to make a little more sense in certain ways. Like on that fourth down and 5, I think it was early in the game, they ran like a 7-yard out route to Gamage, and he caught it and right in stride. I mean, okay, that's simple enough. Do that more. You don't have to throw 40, 30-yard bombs on that situation. So just I know you've said it before, take what the defense gives you, just do it. And I mean, offense played well. They played smarter, more disciplined, only 5 penalties for 30 yards. That's chump change there. I mean, that's nothing compared, especially when you're looking at the other side and how many penalty yards they racked up. I mean, that 30 yards on 5 penalties is nothing. So that was a really good bounce back there because Marshall had been playing very undisciplined, and it really reached an apex against ODU. It was an abomination as far as that goes. So They really rebounded well. So, coaching, I think, deserves a lot of credit for this game because, there was a lot that was riding on this game, and they had a lot to prove in this game after a not so impressive last month before that. So they played really well. Coaching did a good job. So I'll give them an A.
Yeah, fair, first of all. But here's what I'm thinking about this coaching staff from last week to this week. I think that they tried to run this faster paced offense against Old Dominion, and it wasn't working. And they were just out of sorts, and the Boo Birds were starting to fly around in the zone, and you can't really have that. So the game plan this week was changed a little bit. You didn't see Marshall getting up to the line, snapping the ball quick. They were running an offense, like a normal offense. And on the broadcast, they kept saying the Herd's better when they run tempo, and then they weren't doing that, though, to me. They were running an offense, and they got Wells into a rhythm, and they were throwing – they were calling easier routes, better routes. The running game was working. So I think they saw this as an opportunity to look, we got to win some people back over. Let's see if we can slow it down a tick, just a tick, and see if we can find that happy medium of speed versus execution. And if this is what it takes, this is a good offense. If that's the speed they need to operate at.
Hey, and they slowed it down a tick, and they were +5 in the time of possession. So
that's what I'm saying. So you don't have to run 100 plays a game to be this juggernaut offense. You can still run. I don't know how many plays they ran, but you can still run an offense like this and be productive. I mean, again, when's the last time we talked about Marshall scoring touchdowns on 6 consecutive possessions?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been so long, I can't remember when it is.
Nope.
So I want to revisit, when we talk about overall, I'm going to revisit my keys to victory because, you mentioned some of them, like what I said, and it caused me to want to go back and look at it, and pretty nice. So, fair grade for the coaches. Good job for them, getting the guys on the road, long road trip, on a short week, and putting together a really, really solid game for Herd fans to enjoy. What do you got overall for the Herd against North Texas?
This is an A game, in my opinion, overall A. I mean, there's no doubt that when you go all the way out there in the state of Texas where Marshall has only 2 wins ever, you're on a short week, it's a Friday night game, you're playing in some pretty adverse conditions given the fact that it was as windy as it was, and, Marshall had been coming off of some very less than stellar games performance-wise. They needed a game like this to get things back in the right direction, and they got it. And, you were talking about your keys to victory. I'm just now looking back at mine for this game, and I think they nailed 3 out of the 4 that I wrote down. The first one I wrote down was play smart. I think they played smart.
Yeah, 5 penalties says that.
5 penalties, no stupid, unnecessary roughnesses or anything. So very good there. I said finish in the red zone. They did that. 49 points. Sure up the run defense. Not quite there. And then forget where you're playing. And whether or not they even cared about that, I don't think they thought about that they were in Texas. So I think they did a good job on 3 out of the 4. So, this was a very good game. And hopefully, what's Huff always say about closing the gap and this and that. And hopefully this is kind of one of those gap closing games where now Marshall can start turning it around and get back on the right track for the rest of the season. So overall A.
Yeah. Let's close the running lanes gap. That'd be the best gap to close in the short term. Let's do that. But I tell you what, I want to talk about that point where you said forget about where you're playing. North Texas's crowd did nothing to make that a hostile environment.
No.
I think it's probably a disservice to the teams of Texas, especially the smaller ones, the G5 teams, to force them to play Friday night games. Everybody and their brothers at high school games in the state of Texas on Friday. That's a true disservice. That's like Marshall scheduling home games the same week that it's like homecoming in Huntington High. That's ridiculous. There's not enough going on in the city of Huntington to where Marshall should be playing at home the same week Huntington High or Midland or Spring Valley is playing a homecoming game. That's crazy. But anyway, my keys to victory are, I can say that they easily accomplish 2, I can justify the third, but the second I really can't, because my first point to victory was no turnovers, and they had 2. Number 2, I said take what you can get, and that's exactly what they did. We didn't see them trying to hit on 1 out of 8, long throws down the field. They were content to take what was open, and ultimately allowed them to hit on a couple of big plays. Number 3, if you'll recall, I said the defense should play a bend, don't break defense, which meant, make them settle for field goal attempts instead of touchdowns. Well, I can justify that one because we didn't really see any sustained touchdown drives by North Texas. It was chunk plays, 75-yard run for a touchdown, 51-yard run for a touchdown. So that, I think, kind of came true as well. And number 4, I said stop killing yourself with penalties, and they did. They only had 5. So it's almost like we know what we're talking about, Trace. It's pretty amazing, right?
Sometimes.
So we don't have a preview this week. The Herd has their bye week, so 2 weeks they've got 2 weeks to get ready for Florida International coming to the Joan. So I guess that leads us to final thoughts. What do you got? Final thoughts for this week, and then we will get out of here and finish the weekend off.
Yeah, I mean, really good game. Like I said, I don't think it can be overstated that they really, really needed a game like this. I mean, even when they had won the only game they had won recently was Old Dominion, they looked like crap in that game. I mean, it had to pull it out. I mean, in the last minute, against a pretty bad team, just did not look good. So they needed a game where they could flex their muscles. They needed a game where where most things went well. They needed one of those get-right games. And I didn't expect it to be this one, but I'm glad it was. And hopefully, they can follow that up with a really good game against FIU in a couple weeks. Got some time off in between there. So hopefully they can get it together and keep it together if they can figure out what they want to do. But it's a good start for this one.
Yeah, there's no time like the present to start a winning streak, and hopefully that's what Marshall has done. Hopefully they have answered some of those questions on offense. And let us not forget now, we're 2-3-ish, almost 4 weeks away from, the injury to Talik Keaton. So the Herd should be looking to get him back in a few weeks. I don't think he'll be back for Florida International, but he should be back hopefully by the 75-week game against UAB. And he's been a key cog in that offensive machine. So having him back is only going to be more beneficial when you talk about the continued production of Xavier Gaines, Corey Gamage, Shadid Ahmed, and guys like that. If Marshall can just, I'm going to steal Huff's line, if they can just close the gap in the run defense game, then I think they're going to be a hell of a lot better. This is a super huge strength for this team the past, 3-4 years. I mean, virtually nobody was able to run consistently on Marshall, and now all of a sudden they can. And it's not like they don't have the guys there that know how to plug the run gap. So something is amiss that can be fixed. But overall, great effort. It's nice to get this one. They needed to get this one. And you're right. You don't win this one and you're under 500. Now they're over 500, winning record in conference. And, I'm going to close it out by saying what Coach Huff said that proved to be true. Scared money don't make money. And they weren't scared. And they put a lot of points on the board. So congratulations to Charles Huff, the staff, and the players. Last thing I'll say is, once again, send those positive vibes to Devin Miller. Hell of a guy, hell of a kid, hell of a player. And we want to see him back as soon as we can see him back. So, Trace, take us out of here, and we will be done this week.
Go Herds.
Go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. We'll see you later in the week. Later.